Are continuing to discuss the song Gopinath. Last class on Monday discussed a statement that Bhaktivinoda Thakur said is basically, I'm helpless, you're everything, I'm nothing. He said, you can do anything. And so we discussed that idea that Krishna can do anything, even with us, even if we can't do everything, he can do. So that was an interesting discussion, very important. It forms, we discussed how that forms the basis of most prayers, that my job to become Krishna conscious is beyond, as we say in America, beyond my pay level. Your help is necessary, and you can do everything, especially because I'm not qualified. I need your help. So that was the idea. It was an interesting class, and I think it underscored this mood of, it underscored the point that this is the mood in most prayers. It's a confrontation with reality, or maybe not a confrontation, a recognition of this reality of my insufficiency to become purified on my own, proven by the fact that we're still in the material world, so we haven't been able to do it on our own. And faith in the reality that Krishna can do it, if we have the faith. And we talked a little bit about how Krishna reciprocates with the faith in other classes. So it becomes a problem when we don't have faith and Krishna reciprocates with the lack of faith, which then reinforces the lack of faith. And sometimes that happens. Of course, it works the other way, that you have faith, Krishna reciprocates with the faith, and then you have more faith. So prayer is really in the mood of faith, that I'm praying for something which to me seems impossible. I have no qualification for it, but I want it. That's why I'm praying for it. I need it. It's essential for me. I can't live without it. And now I depend on you to give it. And will come up today also, and we'll continue. We didn't even get past the first sentence, the first half of the sixth verse of the first part of Gopinatha. It has 3 parts, I believe. And now we get to the second part, which we've discussed before, but it's sometimes confusing, or it can even be potentially discouraging if we don't take it properly, where he talks about completely unqualified, or the lowest of sinners, like I'm really bad and I'm asking for something really high. And so we'll discuss that today, that actually, in one sense, although it sounds ironic, in one sense, the lack of qualification is the qualification. So that is encouraging, isn't it? The lack of qualification is the qualification. So, but before we start, we're going to go to Vrindavan. I just have to call up my drummer, who will obediently show up and play on perfect beat. My trusted drummer. He always shows up whenever I call him. Radha Madhava Kunjavi Hari. Hey Radha Madhava Kunjavi Hari. Gopi Janavallabha Giribharadhari. Gopi Jana Vallabha Giridhara Dhari Yashodhanandana Rajajanaranjana Sudhanandana Rajajanaranjana Jamunatira Vanachari Jamunatira Vanachari Radha Madhava Kunjavi Hari Radha Madhava Kunjavi Hari Vijanavalabha Girivara Dari Vijanavalabha Girivara Dari Jasodhanandana Brajajanaranjana Jasodhanandana Brajajanaranjana Jamunatira Vanachari Jamunatira Vanachari Radha Madhava Kunjavi Hari Radha Madhava Kunjavi Hari Jai Radha Madhava Kunjavi Hari. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Govinda. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Jai Gopinatha, Hare Hare Bol. Srila Prabhupada ki jai. Om Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prishnaya Bhutale Shrimate Bhakti Vedanta Shaminiti Namane Namaste Saraswati Deve Gauravani Pacharine Nirvise Sasanyavadi Paschachita Satarine. I think I've shown you that bead bag in the back. That bead bag it's like bigger than my head. So my beads aren't big enough for that bag. I'll need to get beads about this big to use that bag. It actually has a picture of Prabhupada on it. I don't know if you can see. But there it is. It's hanging on my bookcase. We're reading from Gopinatha Part 1, and we are reading from text 6. And we read the first half of text 6. I will read the Bengali again. Gopinath tumi to shakali paro, durjane tharite tomara shakati, ke ache papiro ara. O Gopinath, since you can do anything, you have the power to deliver all sinners. So that is all we read on Monday, and the whole class was just on that. So the second line, who is a greater sinner than I? So let me read that again. O Gopinath, since you can do anything, you have the power to deliver all sinners. Who is a greater sinner than I? So it's a petition, and it's like a petition saying, I know you can do this. That's why I'm asking. I wouldn't ask if you couldn't do it. So just, let's state the facts here that like my position is not really good, but you can do whatever's necessary to make my position better. And so just kind of, it's a form of glorification, but also just asserting a fact that needs to be considered. You can do this. I know you can do it, which is why I'm asking. So let's read the Bengali transliteration for that part. Ke ache, who is there, papiro ara, more of a sinner than myself. Now, we've talked about this a little bit before, and what we had often said is that what we're trying to do is enter into the mood of these songs. And Bhaktivinoda Thakur has written this song in a way that we can understand our position, understand the mood we should have, and understand how to pray. So now comes this big one, which is really, really sometimes confusing. Who is a greater sinner than I? Does he actually feel that way? And if he does, how do we relate to that? And the answer is yes, he does feel that way. And the next question is, should I feel that way? And the answer is, do not imitate the pure devotee. The answer is, yes, you should feel that way, but don't imitate it, because if you imitate it, it won't help you. So, in one sense, he's letting us, he's giving us the insight, and I think we already have this insight. He's giving us the insight that as you advance, you become more humble, you feel lower, and then when you have prema, you feel you're on the bottom of the pile. That everyone is better. So that of course for us is inconceivable. How could you feel that everyone is better, especially when you're a pure devotee, which really makes you Narottama, the topmost human being. Bhaktivinoda Thakur arguably could be said to be the topmost human being on the planet. And if we want to be, let's say, a little more open to other possibilities, that there were people as advanced as him living on the planet at that time that we may not know about, say, one of the most advanced, one of the most pure, one of the purest devotees that's walked the face of the earth, and he's feeling that he's the most sinful. And in one sense, all you can say is, wow, like, that's amazing. How is that? And I don't think it's that difficult to understand, because we understand that as you progress in Krishna consciousness, you become more humble. Hopefully, we are more humble than we were when we joined. Hopefully, we're less concerned about what others think about being recognized and honored than we were when we were first devotees. I'm not saying it's completely gone, but hopefully that's the case. I think that is the case. And so if that continues, then what happens? If that continues, then what happens is, as you progress, you start to feel lower, which seems to be a paradox, doesn't it? Because you're going higher. You're actually getting better. And as you're getting better, you're feeling lower. You meditate on that one, You can write that down on you can get a tattoo on your arm and you can look at it. As you get better, you feel lower. And the opposite is also true. Often we see young devotees who don't understand Krishna consciousness become proud of a little advancement they make. And they're not very advanced, and their estimation is that they're more advanced than they are. So that's a symptom of not being advanced, to think that you're advanced. Now, someone will say, but, it seems like we are advancing, and is it a sin to recognize that we're advancing? It's not really a sin to recognize you're advancing. It's a sin to become proud of it. But then you might say, well, it doesn't seem like Bhaktivinoda Thakur even recognizes he's advancing, and he only recognizes that everyone's better. That's the bhav of prema. But you can't imitate that. And so you actually have to recognize if you're advancing to know if you're doing the right thing, isn't it? Because if you're not advancing, then you have to go back to the drawing board and think, well, what am I doing wrong, or what am I not doing right, or what should I stop doing? You have to consider that, because it's like a map back to Godhead. So you have to be aware of that. So that's not a problem to say, I feel more humble now than I did before. And then someone says, you say you feel humble, that means you're proud. What you mean is, I can recognize that my desire to be honored or glorified has lessened over the years. So the only problem would be now and say now I'm thinking that I'm better than other devotees because I recognize I'm making advancement. That's where the problem comes from. It doesn't come from recognizing your advancement. It comes from becoming proud of it. And not even so much being proud of it, because I can be proud that by Prabhupada's mercy I'm advancing. It's becoming, feeling yourself better than others. That's where the problem comes. And then there are ramifications of feeling yourself better. Making offenses is one of them, a big one. I'm better, I'm smarter, I know more. Putting other people down, that's a ramification of feeling oneself better. Domineering, controlling, exploiting can be results of thinking yourself better. So that's where the problem comes, because actually you have to know if you're advancing or not. There has to be some barometer so you can adjust, so to speak, adjust the airplane. The airplanes keep going off track and you're always adjusting. So you have to adjust. So when you read this statement, what's the statement? Who is a greater sinner than I? Don't try to imitate that. Don't, it's not advisable that you go around telling all the devotees, Prabhu, I just want you to know I'm the most fallen. There's no sinner greater than I am. Well, the fact is there are sinners greater than you and I. I hope there are. I hope we're not number one on the sin list. But it's, and then you're saying, well, is it factual that he's the greatest sinner of all? No, it's not factual, but that's how he feels. And we had discussed this earlier when we gave reference to Mahaprabhu feeling that it was wrong to maintain his life because he should have died in separation. And because he didn't die in separation, he doesn't have love of Krishna. And so why would I maintain my body if I don't have love? It seems like pointless. So these are all manifestations of prema, which is why you can't imitate them, because it's like a little 5-year-old boy trying to imitate, an adult. And, it doesn't work. It doesn't work that way. So the way it works is that you and I, we all gain from what he's saying insight into the heart, the mind of a pure devotee. It gives us insight into what advancement looks like. This is what it looks like when you advance. Am I advancing? Are you feeling others are better than you? Are you looking at your life and feeling, yes, I have so much to be proud of. I could become puffed up. I can do this, I can do that. But the pure devotee chooses to look at their past sins. Say, this is the reality. Although, I may have distributed 100 Bhagavad Gitas today or yesterday, but still, if you look at overall my life or lives in the material world, I've been very sinful, and I need your mercy. So then it brings us to this other idea. Why is he saying, who is a greater sinner than I? Well, because that becomes your qualification. Patita Pavana. Mahaprabhu's the savior or the friend. Dina Bandhu, the friend of the fallen. Patita Pavana, the purifier of the fallen. So we've heard many times that Lord Chaitanya extends his greatest mercy to the most fallen. So sometimes the devotees will pray, I'm the most fallen, kind of like charity is being given to people and you raise your hand and say, well, I need it the most. Is it true that I need it the most? Not necessarily, but you feel you need it the most because you feel you're the most fallen. And so, like Narottam Das says, over here, my claim is first, I'm the most fallen. My claim is, got to get that out of there. Okay, now I can do it. My claim is first, I'm the most fallen. So he genuinely feels that way. So the point is, if you don't genuinely feel that way, don't go advertising that's how you feel. But at the same time, we all obviously feel fallen, and so we take refuge or solace in this reality that you can't be too fallen not to get the mercy, and in fact, the mercy goes to the most fallen, which pretty much proves or legitimatizes Prabhupada coming to the West. Not proves he comes, he already came, he can't prove it. Legitimizes his coming in the sense that the mercy is meant for the most fallen. So let's go to the place where the people are most fallen. They'll pick it up. And in fact, that's what happened. The Americans, the people in the United States and Canada, was the first place Prabhupada came, were accepting the mercy more readily than the people of India, who were not as fallen, quote unquote, fallen, lowly. The Indians were not as sinful and not as and they're not disassociated from Vedic culture. We were disassociated. We didn't know about it. Beyond disassociation, we just didn't know about it. So there you go. Let's give the mercy to the most fallen. And Prabhupada was in the part of New York where, yeah, you could say that was, they could rename the Lower East Side to Jagai Madaiville or something like that. So, sometimes we joke that people are like Jagai Madai. not actually, they were not gangsters, but we kind of put them in the same category in a sense. Yeah, more or less everyone in Kali Yuga is in a similar category. So the idea is that a devotee is not discouraged because they're fallen. In fact, they're somewhat encouraged because they know Lord Chaitanya as most kind to the most fallen. So how do you understand that? Well, there are many ways to understand. One way is, let's say you're distributing food and you only have so much food, and it looks like, well, we don't distribute food, we distribute prasadam. This is a hypothetical example, maybe not realistic, but just to help us understand this. Let's say you had food for 50 people and 75 people show up. And you're thinking, well, if I take the food for 50 and give it to 75, everyone's still going to be hungry. And there's some people here that don't really look hungry. They're stout and strong, as they say in India. Very healthy, big and strong. So he doesn't look like he needs food. But there's some people very, very thin. And so you're thinking, these people really look hungry. They really look like they need this. This other guy, he's big, stout. He seems to be doing fine. So let me just line up all the people who really look like they need it and give it to them. So that's Mahaprabhu's, he's looking for the skinny people, the people devoid of piety. They're not fat with piety. He's looking for the most fallen. In this age, he decides, well, we are going to give welfare. So if you give welfare, you're going to have to find people who need it. So, come to the welfare office and show me you have no money, you have no job, you're handicapped or whatever it is. And then you'll get the free housing, you'll get the food stamps, so you get your food and like that. So it's something like that. So the point is that a lot of times we feel, discouraged a little bit because we feel fallen. And so, in one sense, you could joke, you come to me and say, Prabhu, I feel really fallen. I say, well, that's fantastic because you're going to get the mercy first, So that's the paradox, You're lamenting that you feel fallen, but the reality is that's your qualification. So, you could kind of shed tears of happiness, shed tears of joy in your fallenness. And nobody's too fallen to be kicked away by Mahaprabhu, and nobody's too fallen to be kicked away by Prabhupada. And as I was saying in the Vyas Puja, I think I was saying that, or somewhere I was saying that the spiritual master will never leave the disciple, but the disciple may leave the spiritual master. So nobody's too fallen for the mercy. They may not take it. They may think, I'm too fallen, I don't want to take it, or I shouldn't take it, or whatever reason. But it's not the way Mahaprabhu feels. So the mercy's there, and you just have to take it. Okay, so we have some questions. This is such an interesting, I find this such an interesting topic because some of you know that I developed a course on humility. The course is very long. I never even finished teaching it all. It will probably take 20 or 25 hours to actually finish it, and properly or completely. And what happens when we study humility in depth is we basically start to realize that we're not really familiar with humility, or whatever we think humility is. It's much deeper than that, and deeper and wider. And it's almost like learning a new language, like the language of humility is a foreign language to most people, because we didn't come in this world to become humble. We came to imitate Krishna. So there's a very interesting course of just we learn in that course how the pure devotees think, the humble ways they think, and it's really like a foreign language. You just read the statements of pure devotees, and it's basically your response is, "Oh my God, I couldn't even fathom that this level of humility, that people think this way. It's just inconceivable." like I'll give you one example. It's just an amazing example. So there's a brahmachari. I'll get to your questions or comments, don't worry, I see them. There's a brahmachari in Gaudiya Math during the time of Srila Bhaktisiddhanta. Older brahmachari, leading brahmachari, and he's engaged in services all day. And then some of the other brahmacharis find out that he's not chanting his rounds or chanting any rounds. And they come to report that to Srila Bhaktisiddhanta. And Srila Bhaktisiddhanta asks, what is he doing? And they say, well, he's engaged in service all day. Like every waking hour, he's engaged in service, which is why he doesn't have time to chant. Now, this is Srila Bhaktisiddhanta's response. Now, imagine what his response. Well, I've kind of given it away because we're talking about humility. But then I would, I want to say, imagine his response, and now there's going to be some humble response coming up. But imagine, if you were the temple president, what would your response be? This is not good, and this is like, you can't live in the temple. You're not chanting 16 rounds. Which would be, I wouldn't say it would be a wrong response. It would be quite normal. You want to rectify it. You might get very strong with that devotee and so forth. Srila Bhaktisiddhanta said, and of course, this is how he felt, and of course he wanted to teach this. He said, what an amazing devotee, that even though he's not chanting any rounds, he's engaged in devotional service. He has so much devotion, it's like his cup is overflowing. So even though he's chanting, he's got this huge cup of bhakti that keeps him going. And then he says, if I didn't chant my rounds for a day, I couldn't do that. That's humility. That's the response of humility. That's what he was teaching his devotees. That's what Prabhupada wants. Now, let's look at the landscape of ISKCON. Have you ever heard, I imagine you haven't, but I will just ask, have you ever heard a devotee being criticized? Let me think. I don't know. Maybe like 46 years ago, I think I kind of remember hearing, no, it's not like that. We hear it all the time. Now, with the digital age, it's become more of a problem because more people are hearing it because we have access to more people online. So when I find a devotee's actions objectionable, I can go online and there's thousands of people, potentially, tens of thousands, even hundreds, even millions, potentially, who could hear me say, I don't like what this devotee's doing, etc., etc. Now, wouldn't it be beautiful if you heard someone talking about, there's a brahmachari in Mayapur, and he doesn't chant his rounds, and he's a senior brahmachari, and everyone respects him, and you say something like, it's so amazing, he has so much devotion, that even though he's not chanting his rounds, he's fully engaged in pure devotional service. If I didn't chant my rounds, I would have blooped long ago. Wouldn't that be amazing and refreshing and inspiring to hear? Of course it would be. That's what he's teaching us. So, it's something to think about. It's just, like I say, we can't imitate, but it just helps us enter more deeply into what is going on in the heart of a pure devotee in comparison to what is going on in my heart. Like, how do you feel when someone criticizes you? Bhaktisiddhanta said, you should feel Mahaprabhu is correcting me. And he said, you should feel Mahaprabhu is trying to make me humble. Most of us don't feel like that when we're criticized. We're like, who is this so-and-so, who is this so-called devotee? Who does he think he is? What does he know about me? How dare he? That's our initial response. Not like, oh, this is nice, Mahaprabhu is, this devotee's helping me become more humble. Isn't it? So, there was a song, we got a long, long way to go. Wasn't there a song like that? Something. Marco will tell us. He's the expert. Got a long. No, that was Mangalananda. Got a long way to go. Da, 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 da. That was Mangalananda. That was a line from a song by Mangalananda, our godbrother. About his Krishna consciousness, saying, "I've got a long way to go." Da da da, da 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 da. Okay, so I'm going to get to your comments and questions. First up is Achyutananda. And the reason it's pronounced Achyutananda, not Achyutananda, is because you are combining two words, Achyuta and Ananda. And Ananda is actually not Ananda, it's Ananda. But even if it was not Ananda, what is it? Ananda? Ananda. I have to double check. But when you combine two words, one ending with A and one beginning with A, you don't say Achyuta Ananda, you say Achyutananda. Very, very convenient, right? You don't have to say you. It's very Australian, because Australians, they always take syllables out of words. Like instead of breakfast, it's brekkie. So you save one syllable. What do they call the petrol station, gas station? I think that's another name for it. Like, eliminate one or two syllables here or there. So in Sanskrit, it's like that. Achyuta Ananda becomes Achyutananda. And so instead of two syllables, Achyuta Ananda, we have Achyutananda. Fantastic language. So Achyuta Ananda Das says, I heard this quote once, humility is not thinking less of yourself, it's thinking of yourself less. Yes, that is not from Srila Prabhupada. And there is nothing wrong with that quote. I think it was Peter Burwash who I first heard that from. He's a long-standing devotee who Prabhupada showed a lot of mercy to. He was the first one I heard that from, and that is stated by someone, and I don't remember it. Thinking of yourself less, yes. Humble people will think of themselves less. This is a partial definition, but it doesn't give the complete definition. And maybe not entirely accurate, because if you see the pure devotee, it definitely looks like they think less of themselves. I mean, they think, what does it say here? Not thinking less of you. They definitely feel like they're less. So I've always thought that it doesn't, it's a nice concept, but it doesn't represent exactly how a pure devotee feels. They do feel less. This quote especially is good, I think, for the more human side of us, so we don't fall into depression, thinking that we're so bad or horrible and just focused on our faults. Woe is me kind of thing. So it balances that out. So in that sense, the quote is good because it balances that, Prabhupada defines humility as not wanting the satisfaction of being honored by others. At least that's one definition. So this definition of thinking of yourself less, it is true as a symptom of humility, but I've never really heard it defined exactly that way by Prabhupada. So that's my opinion from my vantage point, that it is a valuable saying, but it's not really, substantiated exactly, I don't think, in Shastra. It doesn't mean that it's not valuable, because I can't substantiate it in Shastra. But whether Shastra defines humility as thinking of yourself less or not, Krishna consciousness means to think of the welfare of others. So it's a valid point. Whether we call it humility or selflessness and humility are synonymous, you can say that if we want to expand it that way. There's room to do that, but the precise definition may not be that, at least the way Prabhupada and Shastra gives it. But you can study it a little bit further and see what you find in your definitions of humility. Ananda Chinmaya Sadhu Jvala Vigrahasya says, I love. So your name is Anandamaya, Ananda Chinmaya Rasa Pratipavi Tabi Stabira Ija Nija Rupate. Could you imagine having a name like that? And demanding everyone pronounce your whole name? Ananda says, I love the whole series of classes in Gopinatha. It answers all my questions. Yeah, these prayers are deep if you unpack them, isn't it? Achyuta Ananda says, do advanced devotees really consider themselves the most fallen? Yes. That's a symptom of prema. Or are they just more focused on considering others rather than themselves? Both are true. See, the way I've come to understand these, what we could call hyper manifestations of humility, which we are not meant to imitate, but we're trying to understand, they're manifestations of prema. So on the level of prema, there are all kinds of manifestations. Also the manifestations of bhava. It's one of the symptoms of bhava. So when we see this hyper humility, it's not something that can actually manifest before bhava or prema. So you can be getting there. It'll get closer and closer. But when it manifests on this level where we look at it and we get confused, it's like, what is this? I don't understand it. That's because it's a manifestation of something higher. Right? That's the truth. Okay, we're going to put more light on the subject. That's the truth. And that's what we're trying to understand here. We're trying to grasp that concept of humility, which it's basically, we could title this talk, Humility That Doesn't Make Any Sense. Humility that doesn't make sense to us. We have a really hard time understanding humility. Of course, how can you understand something unless you experience it? Ultimately, you can't really understand it or know it without experiencing it. And so we have so little experience of humility. That's why it's such a difficult subject to understand. And so he says, I'm the most fallen. We're like, no, he doesn't mean that. He's just saying that, but he doesn't really mean it. I mean, he's just, it's nice poetry and it sounds pretty and it makes your heart beat, but he doesn't really mean it. No, it's not like that. He does mean it. And we're scratching our head and going, how could anybody feel that way and not end up completely discouraged and, just like really uninspired and depressed? And like, how could anybody even want to live if they feel like that? I'm the lowest of the low. I'm like the worst person in the world. That's why people kill themselves, because they feel that way. So we're scratching our head thinking, this is Bhaktivinoda Thakur. He couldn't feel that way. That's like neurosis, psychosis. This is and so we're like, he's just saying that. It's like nice poetry. It's a good line for a song. No, it's not like that. It's not like that. Hare Krishna. It actually feels like that. So now our job is to just accept that. This is how he feels. We understand it's a symptom of bhava, it's a symptom of prema, intense humility. We understand the Mahabhagavat sees everyone better, sees everyone as a devotee but me. And then you scratch your head on that one. You're the best devotee, and you see that you're not a devotee, and no one, and everyone else you're looking at, or most people, are not devotees, and you're seeing them as devotees. Scratch your head on that one. That's quite interesting. Well, everyone is part and parcel of Krishna. Ultimately, everything is Krishna's energy. Ultimately, everything is happening by Krishna's will. So they're all in, somehow or other he sees everyone is engaged. Everyone's a devotee. They're doing what they should do. It's all divine arrangement. Everyone's a devotee except one person. the man in the mirror, or the woman in the mirror, or the child in the mirror. All right, scratch your head on that one. That's your test question for today, students. I will give you 1 day of Brahma to figure that one out. And I'm not even sure if we can ever figure it out unless we actually come to that level. And then you don't have to figure it out because you understand it. But I find that trying to understand these things is extremely valuable for your devotional service, especially when you're having discussions about Vaishnava etiquette, about criticizing devotees, and all these kinds of things. These understandings of this the intense depth of humility that a pure devotee has are very, very valuable. Because when you have these discussions about criticism, there's always like, well, you need to criticize, because they're doing something wrong, and if you say don't criticize, then actually you're criticizing the people who criticize, and so it's like there's so many ways to discuss it. So and I'm not saying those aren't valid statements, but when you understand the depth of this humility, at least you're starting from this point is that, well, this is the pure devotee. This is the way they do it. Now, you might say, but Srila Prabhupada criticized his godbrothers. It's true. He did criticize some, not all. And he criticized them solely for one reason, to protect us. And if that were not the reason, he would have never done it. And, he had to, if they did or said something wrong and he felt that it was important for us to understand it, then he would state it. But two things: he would never allow us to criticize them, even though he did, but it was really criticizing the action. So understand this is not the right action. And it was not all of them. It was, on occasion, a few of them. And number two, he would never allow us to criticize them. And number three, well, I think we're only at number two. We shouldn't criticize. He wouldn't let us criticize. There's three. He did it. He had a reason. And number three, he apologized to them. Like, in other words, he's saying, like, what I did was wrong, and I knew it was wrong, but I had to do it to protect my disciples. So I did it, and please forgive me. I shouldn't have done it. Something like that. So that's the heart of the Vaishnava. So we don't want to misunderstand it. If we understand the heart of the Vaishnava, then I think we'll understand this topic of criticism well. And I think we'll begin to understand what humility is, because it's so important for us to understand it. Because if we don't understand it, there's always going to be a tendency to try to put ourselves above others, or take the opposite and try to put ourselves below everyone. And we don't have that realization. And we have to be more real. So to be more real is that, yes, I'm not the best and I'm not the worst. But when I become a pure devotee, I will think I'm the worst. But to think that way now it's only we understand that's how a pure devotee thinks. But for us, if you try to imitate that, then you kind of lose out. You may not benefit, but you try to understand it. That's the point. You understand that's how they're thinking, that's how they're feeling, that's how they're seeing. And all you can say is, wow, that seems inconceivable that someone would think that way, and say, well, that's the symptom of love. So then you go to that verse, a famous verse in Chaitanya Charitamrita. A couple of verses. Krishnadas Kaviraj, he's saying, I'm lower than a worm stool. And the first time you read that verse, it's like kind of like an atom bomb verse, isn't it? It's like, what is he saying? This is like, nobody says things like this. Like, what's going on? And he's a pure devotee. He's an elevated soul. He's writing Chaitanya Charitamrita. It's the highest philosophy. Then he's saying something like this. You can't just write it off. It's like, well, maybe, he had a bad day or something. Like, okay, this is like serious. What's actually going on here? And then there's another verse. He says, if you say my name, you'll become sinful. It's like, okay, so why did he say this? What does he mean? Because he feels that way. He feels impure. And so then we start to understand, oh, I get it. The more pure you are, the more impure you feel. The more impure you are, the more pure you might feel, or tend to feel, or sometimes think. Definitely I'm advanced. So, okay, I get it. So now it's a concept. It's like I maybe don't understand it, but I understand the concept. As you go up, you feel lower. Okay, I got it. I got it. So if he feels like a woman's stool, that means he's pretty high. And you go, okay, I'm getting it. I can't imagine feeling like a woman's stool and being blissful at the same time, but he's transcendental, not influenced by the modes of nature, so he's feeling ecstatic. And how do I know he's feeling ecstatic? Because unless you're ecstatic, you wouldn't say that. Unless you had prema, you wouldn't say these things which sound so crazy to us, right? So, you put it all together, you're starting to understand it. Okay, all right. And, taking little pieces of the puzzle, trying to conceptualize it all. This is really, really helpful for us because, humility is like the essence. So this is what we're trying to get. And hopefully we can get inspired by them also, by what they're saying and what they're feeling. And, maybe I could get a little of that feeling. Maybe I could, get off my high horse a little bit. Maybe I could maybe if I understand all this, I'll apologize to a devotee for something I said 10 years ago when I was thinking I was God's gift to the world and criticize them. This is supposed to be the effect that maybe I could handle situations better than I'm handling now. If I were a little more humble, if I think of Krishnadas Kaviraj or Bhaktivinoda Thakur or Narottam Das Thakur and how they present themselves, maybe a little of that could wear off on me and I could interact better with devotees. So that's where we're going with this, at least in our state. So, So Achyutananda is saying, do they only think themselves the most fallen or focused on considering others rather than themselves? And the answer again is both. But the first one is more prominent. You could say the second one, they think of others more than themselves. That's a byproduct, but it's a byproduct of bhakti. That just naturally happens, compassion. So Ananda Chinmaya Sadhu Ujvala Vigrahasya says, seems like a fine line between imitating and following etiquette and accepted style of behavior in ISKCON, how to balance it out. Well, when Prabhupada talks about imitation, he specifically means that not that you can't act that way, but while you're acting that way, you don't think you're on the level of people who act that way. So if let's say I want to practice humility, and so I see you, Ananda, when I go to London, and I say, okay, I need to work on myself and practice humility. So I think, well, how would Prabhupada deal with you? And I think, well, Prabhupada would thank you for all the service. And let's say I were staying at your house, he would thank you for whatever you're doing, and he would encourage you and like that. So that's what I do. But if I walk out of your house a week later and I think, now I'm like Prabhupada, they should put me in charge of ISKCON. I should be the founder Acharya Junior. Then we have problems. And I don't doubt there'll be someone who will come along and someday think like that in the name of pure devotion. So that's when you don't have problems from imitating the action. You have problems when you think you're on the level of those who do those things. It's just a simple little tweak there. We're all sitting together, we're hearing Shastra. The Goswamis did that also. Good that we're doing it. Prabhupada wants us to do it. We're following the footsteps. And so we're doing what the Goswamis are doing. We're reading Shastra, reading Bhajan, we're discussing it. And then you think, well, I guess I'm a Goswami because I'm doing what the Goswamis do. No, it doesn't work that way. That would be imitating. Imitating is not imitating the action. It's thinking I'm on the level of Krishna consciousness of the people whose actions I'm imitating. Prabhupada would say imitation is always a good thing. In fact, we chant Jai Radha Madhava every morning. Are we imitating Prabhupada? I hope not. We're following in his footsteps. But then if one morning you see me chanting and I fall off my chair, I do this big act. I start crying and shaking and fall off my chair. Yeah, then we know something's going wrong here. There are problems in paradise right now. So we actually had this happen. For those of you who were not around in, I think it was 1982, we had an incident like that of a devotee manifesting artificial ecstatic symptoms. And many of the devotees thought they were real, and most or all of his godbrothers knew they were not. And later it was found that they were induced by drugs, of all things. Who could imagine, This is what happens when the spiritual master leaves, and chaos sometimes enters for a while. Of course, we were very young, so there was initial years a lot of chaos, and this was one of them. It's just a fact of history. Can't deny it. So then we know something's wrong. He'd been, at that point, he'd been a devotee maybe 10 years or so. No, maybe it's 1982. So maybe 12, 13, maybe 13 years he'd been a devotee. Or I'm not sure when the event happened. Maybe it happened earlier. So, but let's just say 10 years he's a devotee, and now he's manifesting ecstatic symptoms. Then you have a problem. Okay. And so I think it was Jiva Goswami said, anybody can imitate physical symptoms, external symptoms. You can imitate that. You can walk like a pure devotee. Hold your head up and look around like this. Do everything and take my cup. Just want to show you, I'm a Mahabhagavad. I'm not a Mahabhagavad because it's spilled. Now I'm not a Mahabhagavad. It's spilled on my shirt. Well, that example didn't work. I gave it away. But imagine, I bring my cup and from 2 feet up, like a waterfall, right in my mouth, and you're all like, oh my God, he's a pure devotee. Did you see? It was 2 feet away, And I put it down like this, and I start chanting. And before class, I put the chili peppers in my nose. So I activate them. I have special chili peppers that don't activate until you go like this. And then I start chanting and just crying, and all the tears are coming out. And you're like, oh my God. Oh my God. Yeah, now you're all sitting there falling off your chair, not in ecstasy, but laughing ecstasy maybe. But it's true that people do this. They put chilies in their nose so they can make people believe they're feeling ecstatic tears. They're having ecstatic tears. Yes, it's true. So, nothing's impossible. So Jiva Goswami said, you could imitate that. Just put chili in your nose and start chanting and you'll be crying. And so you could imitate that. And, roll on the floor and scream. Anybody can do it. Well, the better an actor you are, the better you can do it. So if you have some acting skills, you can act it out. But he said, that's not how you judge the purity of a devotee, because anybody can imitate behavior. You judge it by levels of detachment. You judge it by actual humility, these things. So, in a sense, we are imitating. That's the process of Vaidhi Bhakti, is to imitate. Okay, I'm going to imitate Prabhupada. I'm going to get up early in the morning. I'm imitating a pure devotee. I don't want to get up early. I'm chanting my rounds. I'd rather, be on Facebook. So I'm imitating a pure devotee. I'm reading Bhagavatam. I'd rather be reading, Romeo and Juliet. So in a sense, I'm imitating, because I don't want to do it, but I'm doing what they do. But that's the process, because we're asked to do it. Right? But if you think, because I'm reading Bhagavatam, I'm up there with the 6 Goswamis, then it's time to talk to your local devotee therapist and get your head screwed on straight. It's probably screwed on backwards, I think. Did your mother ever tell you that? Your head is screwed on backwards, which means you were thinking about all kinds of stupid things to do, probably. If you had a brain, you'd be dangerous. So, we have to be very strict in following what Prabhupada gave us. Otherwise, we can think that we're way more advanced than we're not. Hare Krishna. One time the devotees were coming together just to hear the Leelas of the gopis. Prabhupada got wind of that. He said they won't be purified, they'll be putrefied. He said this is beyond their level. Yesterday I was listening. Prabhupada said, Mahaprabhu only discussed the gopis with Swarup Damodar, Ramananda Roy, and Sikhi Mahiti. Nobody else. Like, he didn't have, even those who descended as gopis, he didn't discuss with them. That's interesting, isn't it? Only with those 3 intimate associates. Well, what about all the others? Like, we just initiated a devotee as Vrinda Devi Dasi, and in Chaitanya Charitamrita says she appeared as Raghava Pandit. And Mahaprabhu is not even discussing the Leelas of the gopis with Vrinda Devi. That's interesting, isn't it? It's a real example. Discuss it in intimate circles with your most intimate Lalita, Vishaka. These are the Ramananda Roy, Swarup Damodar. I'm not sure who Sikhi Mahiti is. Maybe somebody knows. So that's interesting. That's interesting. So just be careful. That's all I can say. The line has been drawn, Ananda. Now you know. Be careful. Hare Krishna Shruti Ayush Zaure. I said it right? Zaure. She is in Canada right now. Krishna Kanta Sharadiya says, or asks, what are some of the things that we do, besides not following basic principles, to block Lord Chaitanya's mercy from reaching us? Well, you got about 7 hours for me to make the list. All right, let's start at the top with the big one. You could also say, what do we don't do? It's not what we do, it's also what we should be doing that we're not doing. But when I'm looking at your question, I'm thinking more of a mentality, consciousness, to block the mercy. Like if you want Prabhupada's mercy, it's not difficult to get. You just want to understand, what is it that Prabhupada wants from me personally? What does he want me to be? And what does he want me to do? And then you start to understand. Well, you have to start to understand. Then you have to try to understand. Okay, well, what's his mission? What's his heart? What was he expecting of his disciples? And then you start understanding. Okay, he wanted us to humbly cooperate with one another to help spread the Krishna consciousness movement as far and wide as possible, and to do whatever we personally could we'll speak in this present tense, or whatever we can do to make it happen. Say, okay, that's one thing. We know that. We, as his followers, are duty-bound to preserve what he's given us, his instructions, and also his mood. And instructions, philosophical and practical. It's our duty as his followers to be aware of what is right and what is wrong, and to speak out if something wrong is going on, so that it can, something that Prabhupada wouldn't want us to do, we should be aware, so we can bring that to the attention of our own selves and other devotees and authorities if necessary. We have 16 rounds, 4 principles. We know Prabhupada wants to do that, us to do that, rising early, studying his books. But all of that needs to be in the mood of, this is all, I'm doing this to satisfy Guru and Krishna. That's who it's for. To overcome ourselves. That's really what Prabhupada wants. To be able to be an instrument of his will, an instrument of Krishna's will. That's what Prabhupada wants. And when you're an instrument of Prabhupada's will, then everything else I said would just happen naturally. So, if you do that, the mercy will flow like Niagara Falls. Niagara Falls is a big waterfall. In fact, I'm giving class Saturday afternoon to a temple in Niagara Falls, and you're all invited. Prabhupada said, Prabhupada seriously said that he was concerned that his disciples do not have other agendas. As I once said, our only agenda should be Prabhupada's agenda. So if we come to ISKCON with our own agenda, I'll become a leader, and I'll get followers, and I'll become famous, and I'll become rich, and I'll have power and control. If that's why you're going to come to join ISKCON, then you have to correct that mentality. That flies in the face of what Prabhupada wants from us. So Prabhupada wants us to be without agenda, only his agenda, only Krishna's agenda. And if that's your mood, okay, Prabhupada, I'm yours. What is it you want from me? Let me try to understand how I can serve you, both in my sadhana and my life, and give myself to you, and anything I can do to make things better in ISKCON, anything I can do to make myself better, and anything I can do to help other people. If I give myself to that, mercy will flow like Niagara Falls. Maybe that should be a line from a song. And mercy will flow like Niagara Falls, and you'll drown in love of God. Something like that. That's your new song, Saradia. You can start singing it now. Well, we have to have the lines before it. If I just give myself to Prabhupada, do what he wants me to do, then the mercy will flow like Niagara Falls, and I will drown in love of God. Okay, that's my new song. Spontaneously written. Melody's not so great, but we can work on that later. So I think that answers your question. Achyutananda Das says, Achyutananda Das. And if you're from Bengal, it's Achyutananda Das. I used to believe everyone was better than me, but in retrospect, I consider that just a lack of confidence or naivety. Yes, could be. How does considering oneself the most fallen and yet still have confidence to act in the world? That's an excellent question. Excellent question. We also need about 6 hours to answer it. But since we don't have 6 hours, we have to say something. Okay. I may not address the specifics. I may not address the specifics of your question because I would like to address a broader issue, which then would answer the specifics, because there's many specifics. I think you can go back to this idea of imitation, right? All right. So you read that a devotee thinks everyone's better than me. So you think, okay, everyone's better than me, but you have no realization of that. So it doesn't work, right? It's just an idea. So then you say, and you now realize that you were thinking that way because you lack self-confidence and you were naive, both, right? So naturally, when you lack self-confidence, you think people are better. So the point is that we don't want to think people are better because we lack self-confidence. We don't want to think people are better because we're naive. We don't want to think people are better because we have low self-esteem or whatever the reason. We want to think people are better from a Krishna conscious perspective. Then it's okay. So the point is, we can't adapt a Krishna conscious perspective by trying to use material tools, or, it's like, well, I have low self-esteem, so this humble business, well, I'm really fortunate because I really know how to be humble. And then I sit home all day and just cry and don't do any service. That's not humility. That's neurosis. So it has to, when you're looking at this topic of humility, you always have to understand that I have to develop it from the right frame of reference, the right consciousness, not from the wrong place. So, you say, well, I'll just go to my, low self-confidence. I'll just dig into my low self-confidence. That should help me become humble. But then it disempowers you, because humility is not low self-confidence. It's not low self-esteem. There's just apples and oranges. There's no comparison. They're not even apples and oranges. They're kind of like apples and Corella or something. It's just different, really different. It's like ice cream and Corella. It's much different. So it brings up the point that you might develop a good quality, but entirely for the wrong reason, and then you don't want to do things for the wrong reason. Because that Krishna consciousness is all about doing things for the right reason. So people who lack self-confidence or tend to be naive, low self-esteem, etc., they have to really understand humility from a different perspective, that has nothing to do with those things. That is not going to be the source of your humility. And if that's your go-to state of consciousness to try to deflate your false ego, it's not going to work. It's going to work against you. It's just going to make you'll be less self-confident. You'll become more naive. You'll just keep your heads in the clouds, so you don't deal with what's really going on. So for me, for the way I've understood it, or I would say for a lot of us, we have to translate humility often into simply acting humbly, like getting myself to act humbly. Because if I'm going to look for low self-esteem to empower my humility, it's not empowering humility. Better I look to humble actions. What can I do that's a humble action? Like maybe I can serve prasadam today, or do something for another devotee, or maybe I can assess something I need to improve in my life. Let me do actions, or maybe I can apologize to someone or forgive someone. Let me do actions which are manifestations of humility. That's better than going off into this well, I have no self-confidence, so I guess I'm, the most fallen, which is great because that's the qualification. No, but you're not processing it in the right way. So it's not actually humility. It looks like it, but it's like a pondraka humility. It's not the real thing. Imitation. So the second part, how does one consider themselves the most fallen yet still have confidence? So that's a good question. Prabhupada was like a lion. Srila Bhaktisiddhanta was like a lion. But we never say that, well, it must mean they didn't have humility, because if they did, how could they be so lion-like? No one says that. We understand that kind of self-confidence is empowered by humility. Okay, Krishna wants me to do something. I'm going to do it. And I'm going to pray to him to give me the power. And if it takes being bold and aggressive to get the job done, I will do it. But I'll never become proud that it was I who did it. Look at Arjuna. He had a fight. So you can't say, okay, Arjuna wasn't humble because he was killing people. No, you can't say that. Because he was doing it because Krishna asked him. And that's one meaning of humility, is do what your superior asks. Be humble, submissive. So, again, it's a false dilemma. It's like we create these false dilemmas and then we get confused. Well, if I'm humble, then I'm just going to be a doorknob or a rug and everybody's just going to walk all over me. So definitely I'm not going to be humble, because if I am, I'm not going to get anywhere in this world. That's a false dilemma because it's not true. I think Prabhupada got somewhere better than most people, phenomenally, what he did. I mean, how many people write 80 books and travel around the world 12 times at the same time and open hundreds of temples? Not many, if any. So is that the job of a very meek, humble person that's afraid of everyone and has no self-confidence? Of course not. So flip it around, that if you're actually humble, you'll have the most self-confidence, because now you're doing this for Krishna. So Krishna told Arjuna, look, just fight and I'll win the battle for you. Arjuna's like, okay, we can do that. So Arjuna goes out there and kills like anything because he knew Krishna was going to do it. But he was always in the humble state, knowing that Krishna was doing it. So he had all this self-confidence with a capital S. Ta-da! That answers the question. It's a capital S. So this is it's like this argument. When I'm older, I'll take the spiritual life because it's not practical now when I'm younger. Okay. So when you're older, you'll become humble, but it's not practical now. Okay, when you're older, tolerance, not practical now. When you're older, self-control, not cleanliness, austerity, honesty, religiosity, not practical now. When you're older, do it. So it's kind of like that argument, I can't be humble and be successful. And Krishna's saying be humble. So Krishna's, I read Bhagavad Gita, it totally messed up my career. I shouldn't have read it. No. If you take it in the right way, it'll empower you. Right? So humility. Okay, Achyutananda, get a tattoo. Well, you don't have to get a tattoo. But write it down somewhere. Tattoo it on your brain, invisibly. Humility is power. Get that in there. Humility is power. Just tattoo it in your heart or your brain. Humility is power. Arjuna was humble. Pretty powerful. Yudhishthira is humble. Pretty powerful. Bhaktisiddhanta, humble, pretty powerful. Was Lord Chaitanya humble? Yeah. Pretty powerful. So, it's just like we're defining humility in strange ways, and, our definitions are not good. Humility is power. That's the answer. Here's the example given in Srila Prabhupada Leela that spiritual master will never leave the disciple. Good. When a letter arrived from Madhavisa on May 20, this is beautiful. Prabhupada was hopeful. Madhavisa admitted that Madhavisa was a sannyasi who gave up sannyas, and he thought he was going to be rejected. Prabhupada was hopeful. Madhavisa admitted that he was suffering due to his fallen condition and felt that he would like to approach a spiritual life in a more straightforward fashion. If Krishna allowed, he said, he would keep chanting, more straightforward meaning, as a grihasta according. Maybe not as a sannyasi, maybe not in a leadership position. If Krishna allowed, he said, he would keep chanting and praying. He intimated that hopefully he would be able to see Prabhupada in Los Angeles in a week. He didn't even know if Prabhupada wanted to see him, if Prabhupada was going to reject him. This is Prabhupada's reply. Now, get out your tissue box, ladies and gentlemen, because this is so beautiful. You could never read this reply enough, especially if you ever think your guru is doesn't like you or is giving up on you. My dear Madhavisa Maharaj, please accept my blessings. I am in due receipt of your letter dated May 15, 1976. I've noted the contents with great care. I want to meet you immediately. If you do not come to Hawaii and you want to come to Los Angeles, to meet me, then you can go to Los Angeles immediately. If you actually want to give me service, then you can live with me. I want your service. Wow. That was, he wasn't expecting that. He was like, why would I want to see you? You left me, just, good luck, good riddance, and, see you later. I mean, he's not alive now. I can't ask him if that's what he was feeling, but it appears from what I've read that he was feeling that way. And you could imagine giving up your sannyas, going off with the brahmacharini, and, giving up your service at GBC. Yeah, how would you feel? Srila Prabhupada's open-hearted, loving invitation for Madhuvisa to return illustrated the depth of his mercy. Prabhupada only chose to see the great service that Madhuvisa had rendered in the past. Although devotees left Krishna consciousness for various reasons, Srila Prabhupada saw them all as having been tricked by illusion. The result was almost always the same. Usually he or she would take up a life of sense gratification, abandoning the strict path of self-realization. The fact that Madhuvisa had fallen from the strict sannyasa ashram seemed inconsequential for Srila Prabhupada, who saw things from a transcendental, compassionate level. A disciple, Prabhupada once said, may fall away due to Maya's influence, but the spiritual master will never forsake him. Srila Prabhupada was quite prepared to have Madhuvisa back as a householder. His main concern was, again, to engage his fallen son in some sort of service. Okay. We're going to take a 5-minute break so you can finish crying. I'll give you 5 minutes to cry. Okay. I actually have to send this letter to somebody, so I'm just copying it now so that it'll give you time to cry. Yeah. I think all of you know in dealing with me that I try to represent this mood. Because I saw it in Prabhupada. This is how he dealt with us. So I'm just trying to do my best to represent his mood. Okay, so I don't think there are any more comments. Or maybe, Suresh. If Bhakti Siddhanta says it is amazing, then how the devotee will advance? He will think he is doing correct. Oh yeah, that's a good question. Oh, I'm just reading Kamani's reply. I'll get to your reply in a second, Suresh. It was just funny. Ananda, bliss, with a long A. Ananda, short A, without bliss. I learned this at Ananda Ashram. Okay, so Ananda, if anybody calls you Ananda, say, don't dare you call me Ananda. How dare you call me Ananda? My name is Ananda. Are you saying I'm without bliss? Have you cursed me? So, Lokanath Maharaj wanted to, I think he does a class in Sanskrit pronunciation because us as Westerners, we don't know all the, the long and shorts, we don't really know them. And so if it's supposed to be long and you short, it's like saying shows and shoes. It's just a little difference. Where are my shows? And you're like, what are you talking about? Your shows? What shows? Oh, you mean your shoes? Well, why didn't you say shoes? Oh, I didn't know. It's pronounced differently. It's like that. Ananda, sadhana. What do you mean? Sadhya. You mean sadhya. Oh, okay. Sadhya, yeah. Dal. We have any dal? What's dal? You mean dal. Dal. Oh, dal. Oh, dal. I've had this with Indians all the time. I do it my American way, and they don't know what I'm saying. And it takes like dal. You have any dal? Dal. What's dal? And I'm looking at them. You don't know what dal is? And they're like, oh, you mean dal? Yeah, that's what I thought I said. No, you said dal, not dal. Okay, so Sureshwar has a question. So Bhakti Siddhanta, he said something amazing. So he's asking about this brahmachari. Like if I had his bhakti, I would be fortunate because if I don't chant, I couldn't do service. So he's asking, well, what about the brahmacharis? Like, how is well, I think you're asking, well, how is he going to correct that devotee? From what I know of Srila Bhaktisiddhanta, he really made it a point publicly to emphasize humility. And so he could correct that devotee privately, but publicly he wanted to demonstrate this is how we should relate to devotees in that situation. So that's why he did it. He was teaching by his example. That quote is from C.S. Lewis. Okay. Humility is selflessness. Petrol station, Australia is the servo. Let's go to the servo. Gas station, petrol station. Oh, you save 2 syllables. Wow. By going to the servo, you don't have to go to the petrol station. Aussies are great in saving syllables. They're one of the richest. Well, they're not rich in syllables. They're poor in syllables, but they like that. Prabhu, it's true that humility is somehow freeing, blissful, and relishable. For us, statements like, I'm the most fallen, sound depressing. But my guess is that for advanced devotees, it's not like that at all. No, not at all. That's what this whole class is about, is readjusting our definitions and understandings. I wonder what the karmic consequences are of someone who tries to imitate ecstatic symptoms. Often the karmic consequences are that they won't make advancement and they'll think they're advanced. We have to be very strict. I don't know other unfortunate events that may happen. I think if you're exhibiting ecstatic symptoms to cheat people, there's a place where people who cheat people spiritually go, and it's not north. I can tell you that. It's south. According to Shastra, Isopanishad. You go south. We have to be very strict following what Prabhupada gave us, otherwise we'll think we're something somewhere we're not. That's the quote for the day. I was once told that all the symptoms of a pure devotee can be faked, but if you want to know if someone is advanced, look at how they spend their 24 hours. Pure devotee doesn't procrastinate. Yeah. But you really want to look at their consciousness and their detachment, because that, and their level of compassion and all those qualities, because you can't imitate that. And if you try to imitate it, it just makes it worse. We can say devotees' humility is no confidence in their own power, but all in Krishna's confidence. Well, yeah, but once you have confidence in Krishna's power, then you have confidence in your own power. That Krishna will give you the power. And when Krishna gives you the power, you go, great, I'm doing it. He gave me the power, or I'm going to go out and distribute books. I have no idea how to do it. He'll give me the power. Now I've learned how to do it, so I'm going out today full of confidence because he gave me the power. Something like that. They kind of merge together. I have to tear myself away, and me too, because it's time for our japa class. Hare Krishna, we finished right in time, and I have to go. And I will see all of you who want to join japa shortly. And until then, Hare Krishna, we'll see you. Otherwise, we'll see you tomorrow at 9:30, translated into Russian, and that will be on Zoom, broadcast also on Facebook. All glories to Srila Prabhupada. Go Premanandi, Hari Hari Bol.